Story 1. I knew a couple who had been married for years. The wife became pregnant around the 10th year of their marriage. The husband left her because he decided on the day the baby was born that he did not want children. Story 2. The couple was still in love, but one of them became disabled and could not access support benefits unless they were legally single. Story 3. I don't think it was a divorce, but my favorite story is still the "you smell" guy. This man kept telling his significant other that she stinks. He would tell her to go take a shower, say he did not know why he put up with her, and that she smelled very bad. This continued for years. She had seen doctors and other professionals and had even purchased medical-grade deodorants and soaps. She could never smell anything herself, so she would ask her friends, who said she was fine. But whenever her boyfriend or husband came home, he would say, "Oh my God, you stink." Finally, she freaked out and said they needed to break up because she did not know what was wrong with her. It was clearly making him unhappy, and she did not think she stank at all. She said she had been doing everything she could, so they needed to end the relationship. He broke down and admitted that his father had done the same to his mother throughout their married life. His father told him to do it to his significant other, meaning the original poster, because if he could keep her insecure enough, she would never leave him. The whole thing was a lie. She dumped him. Story 4. A man I used to work with divorced his wife during her first round of chemotherapy. He explained that her hair had started to fall out and that the prospect of not being able to pull her hair during intimacy for at least 2 years was too much of a sacrifice. He tried his hardest to play the victim after that when everyone in the office stopped talking to him. Story 5. She didn't like the ghosts that haunted him. He didn't even believe in ghosts. I still think the real reason was the dog walker she was seeing. Story 6. She accused him of having an affair with his boss. As she was a relative, we believed her. However, I met the man a few years later, and it turned out he had evidence of her being involved with at least 4 different men while they were married. She made up the story to save face. That was one awkward Christmas afterward. Story 7. My history teacher in high school was married to a woman who had escaped from a Magdalene laundry in the 1980s. Less than a year into their marriage, she started having seizures that had no visible physical or neurological cause and could not be controlled with medication. Eventually, the hypothesis was that the seizures were caused by the trauma she suffered in the Magdalene laundry, but they could not figure out how to treat them. By then, the seizures had damaged her brain so much that she was functioning at the level of a toddler. There was eventually a new anticonvulsant that came out and was able to control her seizures, but the brain damage was permanent. This was not the cause of their divorce. My teacher stayed married to her for another 30 years. He arranged her in-home care while he was working and took care of her himself when he was home. The actual cause of the divorce was that my teacher was about to retire, and he would not have been able to afford the level of home care his wife needed on his pension, even with him being home more and the government subsidies available in our province. Therefore, she needed to be placed in a long-term care home. The problem was that long-term care homes at the time were prioritizing admitting people with absolutely no potential family support. The fact that they were married would have left her on the wait list for a spot in long-term care for 3 to 7 years. He had to divorce her in order to get her the care she needed. Story 8. This is not the only reason why we divorced, but my former husband and I fought a lot because I would not make an appointment for him at my gynecologist's office. I worked in the office. He was not transgender. He had male genitalia. There was literally no reason for him to see a gynecologist. It was a major source of conflict in our marriage. He did not have male breast tissue concerns. His reason was that he thought it was unfair for a doctor to choose to treat only women. He considered gynecological science to be discrimination against men. I was never able to convince him that a gynecologist is basically a uterus doctor and that there is no reason for a cisgender man to see one. In his mind, he felt oppressed. I was the person who answered the phone and scheduled appointments for patients. He did not want me to call for him. Story 9. My cousin's boyfriend broke up with her because he received a visit from the Virgin Mary in a dream, who told him that from now on he should remain chaste. He is not religious and, of course, has another girl now. Story 10. My family owns a family law firm, so I grew up hearing unusual stories of divorce. The strangest reason for a divorce? The wife did not like that her husband made her ex-husband from a previous marriage look pathetic to the wife's family during a holiday barbecue. Apparently, the husband was noticeably better at grilling than the ex-husband, and the wife felt that her husband had emasculated the ex-husband on purpose. To clarify, the wife was not having an affair with her ex-husband. She was having an affair with her stylist. The dumbest reason for a divorce? The husband idolized his own father. When his parents got divorced because the father thought his wife was getting old and that he should find a young trophy wife, spoiler alert, he did not. The husband filed for divorce so he could act as his father's wingman without any guilt. Story 11. Saw on a different Reddit post. Her husband was purposely over-tightening every jar of food in the house. She finally snapped after he said he would stop but started again a few weeks later, and she filed for divorce. Story 12. Saw this one on Reddit. A man absolutely hates Star Trek and refuses to have it in the house. His girlfriend loves science fiction and Star Trek specifically. They get married. Naturally, the woman wants to watch Star Trek, but her new husband will not let her. They divorce sometime later. Story 13. A married couple owned a semi-detached house. They wanted a mortgage to buy the house next door and combine it into one large property. The bank would not approve a second mortgage based on their joint earnings. They divorced through a no-fault divorce. One of them kept the original house. The other applied for a mortgage independently to buy the house next door. The mortgage was granted, and the second house was purchased. They connected the two houses with a doorway at the top of the landing stairs. They remarried each other. Story 14. The wife was obsessed with toilet paper usage and would listen when the husband went to the toilet to see how many pieces he used. Story 15. There was a story on Reddit about a man divorcing a woman because she lived according to a very precise beige color scheme. She would toss out any item, including baby toys and clothes, that did not fit that scheme. This culminated in a bunch of lovingly knit sweaters the mother-in-law had made. It did not help that this woman came across as utterly irrational and abusive. In real life, I have seen mothers and fathers decide that parenthood is not for them and leave, abandoning their children in marriage. In one case, both the mother and the father did not want the child, so they fought to force the other to have full custody. They would go to the judge and argue against their fitness as parents, blaming the other for having the child. Needless to say, the child is deeply affected and no longer speaks to either parent. Story 16. I heard about a man who was learning the violin while she was learning the accordion, and they agreed to stop learning at the same time to save their marriage. Story 17. I got divorced from my partner for tax reasons. Her employer sent her on a prolonged work assignment to Belgium, which requires both spouses in a marriage to declare tax in Belgium, regardless of whether they live there. Neither of us wanted to deal with the extra tax complexity. We had gotten married mostly because we thought it might make life easier if we moved to a country with tax benefits. Ironically, the complex Belgian tax system was the opposite. I don't remember the exact duration, but I think we were married for about 6 to 9 months. We stayed together as a couple for several more years, but ultimately split up for other reasons. Story 18. They got married in college and divorced by the time he got into medical school. Her reasoning was that he did not make any money. The man is now a heart surgeon in Chicago. Story 19. I know a couple whose last straw was my father making a joke at the wife's expense, and the husband laughing at the joke. For context, they had been having difficulties for a while but were attending counseling to try to save the marriage. At their son's birthday party, my dad was lighting the candles. The wife asked, "Why did you start from the edge instead of the middle?" Dad said, "I was worried you'd have nothing to complain about." The husband laughed, the wife stormed out, and they divorced. Story 20. My friend teared up during the ceremony. Apparently, it was considered unmanly, and she received a negative reaction. Story 21. Long ago, when I was just a tiny little pre-license, I had a couple who had differences about what the man ate. Not because it smelled weird when cooking. Not because it violated her religious beliefs or something. No, it was just the idea of him eating bacon, pork, ham, and so on, and she wasn't Jewish or Muslim. I suspected this issue was masking something much deeper. but I never got to find that out. I saw them for 3 to 4 sessions and they left. About 2 months later, she emailed saying sorry, but they had had a huge fight over the Easter ham and she had had enough. She filed for divorce. Takes all kinds to make the world go round, I guess. Story 22. A man and a woman have 3 or 4 children. She was a large woman and was not considered attractive. Her husband admired her deeply. The wife is diagnosed with cancer. She loses a lot of weight but survives, regaining some weight afterward. Suddenly, other men find her attractive. She enjoys the attention and begins going out to bars at night, staying out late. One day, she sits her husband down and tells him she can do better than him now that she has more options. She packs her belongings and leaves her husband and children as if they never mattered to her, showing no regret. She says cancer gave her a second chance at a better life, and she was not going to waste it. Story 23. My coworker's daughter divorced her husband right after their honeymoon because he was so cheap, he would not let her eat out during their honeymoon. They had to get food from the grocery store for the mini fridge, and that was all they were allowed to eat because it was considered a waste of money now that they were married. However, it was fine when she paid for meals out before they were married. I think it was technically an annulment. She did not want to be married to a cheap person her whole life. Story 24. I knew a couple who had been together for more than 20 years, but suddenly they both filed for divorce because they argued about where to put their toothbrushes in the bathroom. They have 3 children, never went to marriage counseling, and both have successful careers and are very popular in their communities. I am fairly certain there is more to the story than that. Story 25. I saw a Am I the Asshole post yesterday where the man wanted a divorce and was questioning the paternity of his child after his wife, who had been entirely faithful for more than a decade, went to a bachelorette party with a stripper. In fact, most of the strangest reasons for divorce I have read about are found there. Story 26. A friend of mine divorced her husband over a cocktail. He didn't drink. She drank occasionally. They always split the bill except if she ordered an alcoholic beverage. Then she would pay for it. Ironically, his non-alcoholic drinks cost more than her alcoholic drinks. Expensive mocktails, smoothies, and so on. A group of about 8 of us went out for dinner. After dinner, she ordered her first alcoholic drink, a cocktail. He told the waiter no, cancel it. She said yes, she wanted it. He said no, she said yes, he said no, yes, no. This went on for ages. Keep in mind, she was paying for it anyway. She walked out and filed for divorce. He refused to pay for her dinner. I paid for her and said, consider this her first divorce present. Story 27. I went on a date once with a man who had divorced his wife because she was sad all the time and he couldn't take it anymore. It had been about 3 months, and she would still cry when she heard his favorite song. Her father had passed away from a heart attack at the age of 52. But this man believed she should have expected it since all parents die at some point. Maybe if he had been 92, it wouldn't have been as much of a shock, but it would still be something to be sad about and grieve. I put my head down until I could catch the waiter, then left immediately. Imagine if this man ever found out I had checked myself into the hospital for a 72-hour watch 2 years after my mom passed because the grief finally caught up with me. Story 28. Not a divorce, but my friend broke up with his longtime Jewish girlfriend because, as a Southern Baptist, he could not get past the fact that her people killed Christ. Story 29. The wife got a visa to Australia, but he did not. They were trying to leave communist Poland together, so she went ahead with their small child. By the time he was able to join them, they had grown so used to being apart that they did not want to be married anymore. They are still very close friends, but both were married and live separately. Story 30. The husband pretended to have been in the military to impress his wife while they were still dating because her father was in the military. He went to great lengths to maintain this lie as the relationship progressed. He wore a military uniform to the wedding and falsified timelines in his life. After the wedding, he was pressured into getting a government-issued loan for a house, and that is when the story unraveled. Turned out he had bought the uniform online. Story 31. They divorced over a game of Monopoly. Both thought the other was cheating. It escalated to shouting, then fighting, until they both got mad and started sawing furniture in half. 3 days later, they divorced. She lives in France. He lives in Botswana now. Story 32. I know a couple who had different opinions regarding the coronavirus and ended up divorcing because of it. Story 33. My ex-spouse's parents divorced but continued to live together as husband and wife. The reason for the divorce was to separate their finances due to the husband's excessive spending, a car accident causing insurance rates to rise, poor credit, and other factors. Story 34. Medical bills, so the partner is not forced to accept debt after the other's passing. Story 35. Pam Anderson listed Borat as the reason for her divorce from Kid Rock. Story 36. I have a distant relative who divorced because his wife slept too much. Story 37. They got married in a big white wedding. 6 weeks later, they filed for divorce. She realized she did not actually love him. Story 38. A guy I know got divorced over Zhongli in Genshin Impact. He spent 1 to 2 months of his salary on rolls, taken from their shared bank account. Naturally, his wife scolded him because this was irresponsible, and they had bills to pay and a child to take care of. He then chose to badmouth her on Facebook, even though she did not have social media. This was screenshotted and sent to her, which started the divorce process. Story 39. Probably not strange, but I am seriously thinking about leaving my wife for confusing reasons. Last year, her biological father passed away in an accident and left her a $100,000 inheritance. Before this, we had been living paycheck to paycheck. 3 months later, we were back to living paycheck to paycheck. As soon as she heard she was receiving the inheritance, she picked out a new car the very next day. We already had 2 cars, a 2015 Jetta and a 2018 F-150, both in perfect working order. The check had not even been in her account for a full day before she bought her new car, a $38,000 used 2022 Audi, which she paid for in full. A couple of months later, around the time she had spent the remaining $62,000, she decided she did not like the Audi and maybe I was right that it was too much. So she returned it and traded it in for a 2020 Jeep Cherokee, taking a $6,000 to $8,000 loss on the trade-in value. Remember, we already had 2 perfectly good vehicles and 2 young children, ages 5 and 3, who could have greatly benefited from an emergency fund or even a few $100s in a $529 college savings account, let alone a couple $1,000s. That's just part 1. Part 2 happened a couple of weeks ago when she turned that original $38,000 car into owing $18,500 after trading in the Cherokee for a $40,000 2021 Jeep Ranger. She spent even less time considering this purchase than she did the Audi. No research, no inspection under the hood, no test drive, not even opening the doors or looking through the windows. I thought we were only going out to lunch and then to look at the Jeep because it had been having electrical problems. She said she was just curious and did not intend to buy anything. But there is more. She made this purchase after we had to emergency vacate our house 3 months ago due to tornado flooding that caused mold infestation. The house is legally hers since her sick mother-in-law gifted it to her. After thousands of dollars in unexpected costs, including 2 weeks in a hotel, buying necessities to live in the hotel, and rental deposits, we are currently renting for $1,200 per month while deciding what to do with the house she insisted on keeping. Every professional we had inspect the house advised us to sell it quickly and move on. The current total estimate to fix her house ranges from $40,000 to $165,000. The $165,000 estimate includes foundation repair, drainage, mold removal, and damage restoration, but not rebuilding costs. The $40,000 is the bare minimum needed to start fixing the foundation and flooding, which may only be a temporary solution according to the experts. We cannot start rebuilding the interior until these issues are resolved. The plan was to apply for Federal Emergency Management Agency disaster aid, a maximum payout of $40,000 to cover foundation and drainage repairs, plus rental assistance. We did apply and plan to put the money we would have paid in rent into savings for floors, drywall, insulation, and other materials needed for demolition and rebuilding to save on the $100,000 to $120,000 estimated reconstruction costs. FEMA approved us for $10,000 and 2 months rent assistance. We can file an appeal to try to receive the remaining amount, but despite my constant reminders for a month and a half, she has not filed the appeal. We are now 2 weeks away from the deadline of 60 days to make the appeal, and I doubt she has thought about it since I last mentioned it a few days ago. But sure, let's take on an unnecessary $500 per month car payment right now. Story 40. He refused to shave off his beard. I am sure there was more to that story, but that apparently was the relationship's coffin nail. Story 41. Not technically a divorce, but I knew a long-term couple that broke up because he insisted that she should be the one to buy condoms for him. If she would not buy condoms for him, she was showing she was not committed to the relationship. They are both unreasonable, but what a strange reason to end a years-long relationship. Story 42. I divorced my wife because she insisted on involving me in activities I was not comfortable with. We worked different shifts, and on several occasions, I was woken up by her actions. I sleep very deeply, so I began placing our dresser in front of the bedroom door each night to keep her away. She was unhappy about this, but boundaries are important. After many arguments about her desire to explore her sexuality and other issues, I decided to end the marriage. I do not miss her. Story 43. It's been almost exactly 5 years since the divorce. If you ask my stepdad today why my mom left him, he'll say she left because of socks. He's convinced she left him because he refused to pick up his socks. No matter what anyone says, he insists it was because of the socks. It was as much about the socks as it was about the Iranian yogurt, though it was actually closer to the mustard incident. He was an abusive person, and I am grateful she finally got away. Story 44. I know a girl who met her truest love on World of Warcraft. She moved from California to the Midwest to be with this man and start their amazing life. At some point during their wedded bliss, she started an argument with members of her guild that escalated to the point where she insisted her partner defend her from these online bullies. As he was mature, he told her to handle it on her own, so she left. 10 out of 10 romance. Story 45. A roll of toilet paper and which way it goes on the roll. This was more than 30 years ago, and we still tease him about it. To be fair, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. But yes, toilet paper. He has since been happily married for almost 26 years. Story 46. My ex-husband remarried fairly quickly after knowing the woman for a short time. My children never liked her very much, but she was kind to them, and they were trying to get to know her. He divorced her in less than a year and told everyone it was because she is a flat earth believer. Story 47. A university friend got divorced because her husband left dried coconut on the sofa after he ate a snowball, which is a chocolate-covered marshmallow covered in coconut. She was married for 2 months. Story 48. I saw a story about a man divorcing his wife because she chose to breastfeed their children. Why, you ask? Because he believed it was perverted and inappropriate, claiming nipples are only for pleasure. It sounds unbelievable, but she posted the court documents, and it was entirely real. The man was definitely projecting some unhealthy tendencies. Story 49. My sister divorced her ex because he would wrestle with his friends in the front yard and then come inside with a bad odor. I just believed her. Story 50. On the other hand, I know someone who will not actually divorce for religious reasons, but they live separately and both have long-term partners. I think religion disapproves of adultery within a marriage. Story 51. I almost divorced my husband when I was 39 weeks and 6 days pregnant because he ate all the maple-glazed carrots and meatloaf I had made. He said they were gross and did not want them, then ate everything while I was in the shower. Story 52. My mom got in a fight with her first husband and threatened to divorce him. He said, "You wouldn't divorce me?" And she said, "Oh yes, I would." She told me she marched downtown and filed because he didn't take her seriously. Luckily, she married my dad and I am here, but she always loved him and regretted that. Yes, she has an undiagnosed personality disorder from my viewpoint. Story 53. A Mormon couple I knew had an extreme lack of sex education. They did not know anything about it, even on their wedding night. Their expectation was that they would get married, get naked, and lie next to each other on the bed, and God would do something magical for the pregnancy to happen. When nothing happened, the man actually went out and got advice from a male friend about what should have been happening. That was literally the moment he learned that penetration would be involved. They were both so disgusted by the idea that they had their marriage annulled the next day. Story 54. You have a 1-year-old daughter in one room, and you are having an affair with the plumber in another. Your husband comes back home unexpectedly and catches you in the act. This happened to a friend of mine, and he was not the plumber. Story 55. Instinctive stupendous edge racial marvelous pot me childlike consider sulky. Story 56. Not even 10 posts above this one in my feed is a post about a woman whose parents, despite still being in love and living together, have just finalized their divorce to protect the mother from the father's $288,000 in medical debt. Story 57. I knew a man who divorced his wife because he met another woman he thought would be his perfect match. He had a strong moral repulsion to cheating, so he decided to end his current marriage before pursuing the new relationship. There is a certain amount of respectability to that, I suppose, but he had never even spoken to this other woman romantically because he did not want to cheat. He turned his entire life upside down to pursue her. And I will give you 2 guesses as to what happened when the object of his affection found out about all of it. It did not work out well for him. Story 58. A friend divorced her husband because he was afraid of the ghost who was haunting the place where they were staying and tormenting their child. He was also afraid of being alone in the house. I can understand her reasoning, regardless of whether you believe in the paranormal or not. Story 59. Read one case where divorce was filed and allowed because the husband's sex organ was too large. Story 60. Not heard but personally experienced. In the paperwork for my divorce, the reason given was that I did not make her a cup of tea. I am from the United Kingdom. Story 61. The husband of my sister cheated on her more than once. Every time they got back together, finally married, and had children. She wanted couple counseling to resolve some problems they had. He was unable to manage money well and bought nice things for himself. She earned more than him. He acted immaturely and did not help much around the house. He was often mean to the children. Finally, he divorced her on Christmas Eve because she did not trust him. He left her in debt and got together with another woman 2 weeks later. Today, about 1.5 years later, both children do not want to visit him anymore because they have realized what a poor influence he is. Story 62. Chronic prednisone use can significantly affect mood and increase agitation. A man on long-term prednisone for a chronic condition experienced severe anger. After months of mood swings, his wife filed for divorce. During the divorce process, his doctor began to wean him off prednisone. His mood stabilized, and he and his wife withdrew the divorce petition and remain happily married. Story 63. The woman who divorced her husband to avoid being responsible for his medical debt. Story 64. I'm Northern Irish, and I used to work with a man who shared a story about why he was divorced. He is a Protestant, his ex-wife is a Catholic, and their families could not reconcile their differences. My boyfriend's parents almost separated for a similar reason before he was born, but they decided to cut off their toxic families and stayed together. Story 65. I read that a man divorced his wife because she was wearing pants. Story 66. I do not have a source, but I read a story about a couple in rural Pakistan. According to the rules, if either spouse says the word divorce 3 times, then they are divorced. Apparently, they were in bed, and the husband talks in his sleep. The wife heard him say divorce 3 times. She woke him up to tell him he had just divorced her. He called it nonsense since he was sleeping, and nothing said while sleeping counts. She argued it did. They went to the village elders for a decision. The elders said they were now divorced. The husband said he did not want to divorce her because he loved her. The elders said that did not matter. They were divorced. He asked if he could remarry her immediately. They said he could not. He had to marry someone else first and then divorce that person. Only then could he remarry his wife. I often tell people no divorce is a good idea except that one. Story 67. My wife might get divorced because she cheated on me, and I forgave her and took her to therapy sessions. However, she couldn't accept her mistakes. So she told her parents that I am suspecting her and torturing her. She took my children, and I have not seen them for a month. Story 68. Oddly enough, my friends and I were talking. I told a friend that I never really liked his wife much. The other friends at the table agreed with my assessment. He asked us what we disliked about his wife. My point in particular was that she was a black hole for happiness. My friend just said, "Yeah," and divorced her 2 weeks later. Story 69. He wanted a second child, but she did not want to die. She almost did during the first birth due to medical reasons, and doctors warned her. He called her selfish and threatened divorce if she did not change her mind. She divorced him first. Story 70. A coworker thought it was strange that her husband divorced her. After their son was born, she informed her husband that she would be focusing on their son for the next 18 years and would get back to him afterward. She was very confused by the divorce. Story 71. I remember a case in Kuwait where the bride got angry because the groom mocked her for tripping as they exited the courtroom. Story 72. A friend of a friend moved back to his country after deciding that he did not want to pay taxes in his wife's country and support its welfare system. They had 2 children in school, and his wife did not want to uproot her life for such a decision. They divorced shortly after. Story 73. I dated a woman last year who responded to her husband cheating on her by divorcing him, accepting all fault, and taking on all of the couple's shared debt herself. She then took 2 extra jobs to pay off the debt in order to show him how committed she was to making their relationship work. Surprisingly, he did not take this self-sacrifice as a strong motivator to work on their relationship, but as an opportunity to marry the other person and live happily ever after. Story 74. It is not a reason for divorce, but a friend of mine said that in counseling before their divorce, her husband was complaining that she does not like mayonnaise. It was a huge deal that her taste buds were different from his. Story 75. Not divorce but actual murder. A woman in my country claimed her husband did not talk to her anymore for years, so one day she snapped and killed him. Divorce is a very normal and common option here. Story 76. I've heard of someone's parents being legally divorced but still living together. Apparently, the wife receives some kind of government assistance since she is technically a single mother, and that is the exact reason they divorced. Of course, this was a comment from years ago on an online forum, so 1. There is always a chance the story is fake. 2. Even if the story is real, there is a chance what this couple is doing is considered fraud. Either way, it is still a strange reason to divorce. Story 77. Brazilian football player Ricardo Isaacson dos Santos Leite's wife divorced him because he was too perfect. Story 78. I almost divorced my husband because he was supposed to install a small organizer in my closet. Instead, it stayed leaning against the dining room table. We were supposed to go to dinner, and I was de-wrinkling a dress in the dryer. He needed the dryer and took the dress out. He put it on a hanger and hung it from the corner of the closet organizer box in the dining room. I even called a lawyer because I was so angry. We got past it, but he never installed the organizer. Story 79. A friend once told me her parents got divorced because of Princess Diana's death. Story 80. My grandmother got divorced in the 1950s because her husband wanted to move to Montana and raise goats. She did not want to. Story 81. Maybe not that strange, but the strangest that I know personally. A former teacher of mine divorced her husband for being overweight. But here is the catch. He was always overweight. She was overweight too. He was a pastry chef and they both loved to eat until one day she decided to join Weight Watchers and lose the extra pounds. Then her husband was not good enough anymore, as she made painfully clear to her teenage students. I do not know the details of what happened after that, but on social media it looks like she regained some weight and he lost some. They met in the middle at Pleasantly Plump and are back together. Story 82. A woman divorced her husband because he insisted on eating peas with a knife. Talk about a cutting-edge reason. Story 83. Tax reasons. They made errors in filing 1 year. Instead of correcting the tax paperwork, they decided a temporary divorce was easier, involved less paperwork, and was cheaper. Story 84. My grandmother was married 5 times. One man was very tall, and when she moved in, the kitchen cabinets were installed very high. He did not want to adjust, so she left him. Story 85. He ate meat. She was a vegan. They had separate grills. He cooked burgers on her grill while she was gone. Story 86. Beanie Babies were a highly popular line of stuffed animals filled with plastic pellets that allowed them to be flexible and posable. Released in the 1990s by Thai Incorporated, they became a significant collectible craze. The appeal of Beanie Babies was driven by their limited availability, unique designs, and the company's strategy of retiring certain models, which increased demand and value among collectors. Their popularity peaked in the late 1990s, creating a frenzy known as Beanie Baby fever. Although the market eventually cooled, Beanie Babies remain nostalgic collectibles today. Story 87. I worked with a woman who had a child with her husband but divorced him because he was too passive. They had been together for about 10 years at that point. She was somewhat unreliable, though. Story 88. A couple divorced because the husband refused to stop bringing his pet goat to bed. Apparently, the goat was a bit of a blanket hog. Story 89. I work at a police station, and the strangest complaint I encountered was that the husband was too good in bed. The wife felt like he had learned it somewhere or was practicing it on someone else. She said he has a very high libido, and she would not be able to cope with him. Story 90. The reason is justified, but my in-laws had the strangest divorce. They were married for over 30 years, high school sweethearts, but very clearly hated each other. They fought like villains in a movie at every single dinner. They didn't sleep in the same room for more than 10 years. There were cheating rumors throughout the years. Finally, they got a divorce. Father-in-law moved into a retirement community. Suddenly, they started hanging out all the time, playing pickleball together. Now, my mother-in-law sold her farmhouse and bought a house on the same street as him. They are perfectly fine together as long as they live apart and can separate whenever they want. They have become a joy to be around, even after years of toxicity. Story 91. My great-grandmother divorced my grandfather because he drove a truck and refused to sell it. This was in the 1920s. Story 92. My grandmother divorced her husband, not my grandfather, because she lost most of her Social Security benefits due to being married. They stayed together but were no longer married. Story 93. The story of the man who kept eating foods that made him pass gas and tormenting his wife with his constant passing gas comes to mind. Story 94. I have a friend who was rejected because his former wife's new cat did not like him. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.